Welcome to World of Martial Arts TV. I'm Andrew Staton, and today I am really excited to speak to Sifu John Carrigan. He showed me some footage, and I just bust in to talk about it. Is that John is one of the people who actually helps William Shatner, yes, the man, James T. Kirk, do demos. John, welcome to us. Can you tell us all about William Shatner and you and what you do every year with the wonderful 93-year-old William Shatner?
Yep, the one and only William Shatner. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here with you, Andrew. It's been a long time since we've seen each other, too long. But yeah, I think for the past about 7 years now,
Okay.
I had two ambitions when I was young. I used to have a picture of Captain Kirk on the wall and one of Bruce Lee. And everyone said I was crazy. I used to look at the pictures and say, one day I'm going to push that button on Captain Kirk's chair and be an instructor in Bruce Lee's school. And they'd all go, yeah, of course you will. Coming from the Elephant Castle, really poor family, and my father had schizophrenia, so they probably thought I was like my dad. Anyway, the journey has been amazing. I became a martial arts instructor, a master under Sifu or Sigong Richard Bustillo. I trained with all Bruce Lee's original students, made it my life's journey, and I got to know Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek. It's a very convoluted, long journey. I won't go into it now. I did write a book about all this as well. And years later, I'm now looking after William Shatner twice a year when he visits the Star Trek sets in Ticonderoga. It's in upstate New York, and they recreated all the sets exactly as they were in the 60s. And twice a year, Bill goes there, and they have thousands of people turn up, and he does celebrity guided tours of the sets. And I originally went there because I was an actor. I worked on Star Trek, got to know these people, and they saw what I could do physically. And they asked me, would I go over there and look after Bill Shatner? Of course, I'm going to say no. My hero, Captain Kirk. It's one thing working on the screen in Star Trek, and you have to pinch yourself. But when you're on the sets with these people, they walk around the corner, you go, my God, it's Captain Kirk, even though you know it's William Shatner. I agreed to go over there and look after Bill Shatner. And the first time we went to engineering, the engineering section on where Scott used to be, we're standing there and people were asking questions of Mr. Shatner. And someone said, Mr. Shatner used to have lots of fights in engineering, why was that? And he said, well, there's lots of space. And all of a sudden he said, where's John? Where's John? And I was beside him. And he said, John's a martial arts expert and he was a stunt man. And this was when he was still in his late 80s. He said, who thinks I can kick John's ass? And everyone cheered. He said, John, go with it. And so he started to just throw Captain Kirk punches, and I went with it, rolled with it, and he knocked me out. Stood up and gave me a hug. So that began a different part of the relationship. I would look after him, but every time we did a tour, and we did about 8 tours over the weekend, we'd get to engineering, and I think, I wonder if he's going to, and sometimes he wouldn't even give me any warning. He'd just grab me and start beating me up. So that relationship has been amazing. And I've been looking after him for about 7 years now. I go every July and November. So I'm set to go over in a couple of months' time, look after him again. 93, and he's still active and his brain's as sharp as anything. But to me, he's still Captain Kirk. But, when no one's looking, he's Captain Kirk. But otherwise, he's Bill.
Yeah. So let's take a step back now. So when did your martial arts journey start, John?
I'll give you a little bit of background. My mum and dad went together since they were childhood in school. Mum had never had any boyfriends, he'd never had any girlfriends, and they got married. And then 2 weeks after I was born, 2 or 3 weeks after I was born, he went over and started to stroke her hair. It's in the Elephant Castle in London, very poor family. And then all of a sudden he picked up a poker from the fireplace and started smashing her head in. And I was on the sofa, a young baby. No warning, schizophrenia had taken him over. She fought him down 5 flights of stairs, blood everywhere, and he thought he'd killed her, which he very nearly did. So he slashed his wrist 52 times. Well, so they took me, the relations took me for a while. Mum was in hospital 5 months. Dad was put in a mental institution, straight jackets to lot. And the story was, every time he came, she wouldn't divorce him because she loved him, but she was nearly dead. And he came from a place called Cane Hill, which was a really archaic mental asylum. And at school, kids used to say to each other, you're a Cane Hill nutter. That was the saying those days. Anyway, he came out of Cane Hill, and we thought he was cured, but every time he came home, his name was Harry. The other side of Harry would kick in. We had police sieges and everything else. And part of his paranoia was he thought whoever they were, they would get me. So he kept me a virtual prisoner for years. You know, I was only allowed to just go down to this front door and not go anywhere. But as the years went on, he was also a wonderful man, a pianist, intelligent man. And when he was his good self, he'd realized what he was doing to me. I was overweight. I was frightened of the world. So he took me to a martial arts school. When the Kung Fu craze came out, for some reason, he went to see Big Boss on his own, out of the blue. Totally, you know, no idea why. He came back and said, this Kwai Chang Caine you like on the Kung Fu series, he said, he's a fairy. You need to see Bruce Lee. And Dad smuggled me under his raincoat to a midnight showing of the Big Boss at the Elephant Castle Cinema. And this was in 1972. And I saw Bruce Lee and it was like, wow, you know. So then I began putting the Bruce Lee picture up beside the Captain Kirk picture and telling everyone going to be in, you know, push the button and be an instructor. Anyway, Dad took me over to South Kensington. He looked in at the Evening Standard. It was the Kung Fu craze then. We lived through it. We're old enough to live through that, aren't we, Andrew? Me and you, the Kung Fu craze. Yeah. Everyone was Kung Fu fighting. So he took me over to, and he would take me twice a week to a martial arts school over in South Kensington, where they did Feng Shao, I think you pronounce it. And then there was an instructor called Li Wu, and he used to come and watch the classes. And he took 15 of us aside for his class. He was a Wing Chun instructor. He'd done other martial arts. And it was the first time I'd ever heard the name Lee Jun Fan. I didn't know who Lee Jun Fan was. And even way back then, he'd interject into his martial arts lessons with us things that Lee Jun Fan had shown him on 13 occasions. I don't know where they trained. I think Seattle, because he came originally from Chinatown, Seattle. So I was exposed to Bruce Lee at a very early age. Also went to karate for 10 years. And when I got through that, as the years went on, I was fascinated by Bruce Lee. And then I think Danny Santo came over for his first ever seminar with Bob Breen, which I went to. And in 1979, there was the Kung Fu convention that I went to. And that was it. I said, I've got to devote my life to finding out who this man really was. But I had the two passions. One was I wanted to be an actor somehow. How do you be an actor if you're, you know, a really poor boy in the Elephant Castle? But while I was training the martial arts, the only place my dad would let me go, apart from taking me to the martial arts lessons, he'd let me and my mum go to a Star Trek convention once a year. It had just begun. So we used to go there once a year, and I'd see these amazing people on stage. My gods, wow, they're actually in front of you. And at one of these conventions, where George Takei, who played Sulu, there was a problem with some football fans, and there was a disabled girl who was about to get trampled and smashed by these football fans. And because I'd been doing the martial arts for a few years, I was the only one when I had the courage to run out and get her in to safety and help this girl. And because of that, the committee said, as a thank you, you can go to breakfast with George Takei. So me and my mum went to breakfast with Sulu, come back on the train with George Takei. And there is a point to all this for the martial arts. And each year, the conventions would say, John, would you like to be security for these people when they come over? So I began, because I could handle myself a little bit by then, I began to be low-key security for Scotty and Chekhov and Sulu, and eventually William Shatner came over. And because they'd heard what I did with this girl, Richard Arnold came over. He was Gene Roddenberry's assistant.
Yeah.
Now, I became friends with Richard Arnold at the convention. He said, amazing story we heard about you with a disabled girl. Keep in touch. We never had a phone because we weren't rich enough. But my aunt who lived down on the ground floor of the flat we lived in, the flat we lived in, she had a phone. And one day the phone rang. She said, oh, there's a phone call for you. It's from America. So I ran down to her phone, and it was Richard Arnold, and he put Gene Roddenberry on the phone, the creator of Star Trek. I was like, what? And Gene said, I'd like to give you a thank you for what you did at the convention and looking after my cast and what you did for that girl. I'd like to pay your fare. Would you like to come over and visit the Star Trek sets? What would you say? Blown away. I had such a really poor upbringing, all this stuff we'd had. And yeah, so I went over to meet Gene Roddenberry. I hadn't even left the street, but there I was on a plane. And when I was in Gene's office, he gave me this amazing talk. He said to me, what are your ambitions? And I said, well, I'd like to have been an actor, And he said, are you dead? And I said, no. He said, why can't you act? you know, aren't you an actor? I said, well, I can't act. He put his hands on my shoulders, looked in my eyes and said, if man had only dreamed of walking on the moon, but never taken the steps to get there, we'll be earthbound. If you wish to fly tomorrow, flap your wings today. I was like, he said, become an actor. Then he said to me, let's go and sit in Captain Kirk's chair. So they took me on a tour, a maiden tour of the Star Trek sets, and it was incredible. And I had one day where we were doing nothing. Richard Arnold had arranged me to go to Disneyland as you would and all these things. And I said, well, Bruce Lee, you know, had a school over here, and I've got this address for a place called the IMB Academy. See, as the Kung Fu tie-in here, the martial arts tie-in. So Richard got the address, and he drove me to the IMB Academy. I didn't have a clue what I was going to find or anything. And I walked in there. This was 1983, I think. And behind the desk was Sigong Richard Bustillo, who I didn't even know who Richard was. And he was warm and friendly. And I told him a little bit about myself, and you know, and he gave me a tour of all of the academy and Bruce Lee's Wing Chun dummy and Bruce Lee's heavy bag and all these things. They said, you do the martial arts yourself? I said, yeah. And he said, show me some of it. So I did some kicks and punches and told him what I thought I knew about Jeet Kune Do, you know, strong side forward, interception rather than blocking and all this. And he said, would you like to sign on with me? And I said, but I live in England. He said, well, you said you come over here twice a year and you can bring me over there twice a year, so we can make it work. And that was it. From 1982 onwards, I was under the tutelage of the amazing man, Richard Bustillo. And also I'd go to the States and I'd visit everyone I could. I went to Seattle to see Taki Kimura, and I would train with everyone who I could find, and all my money went on training. So I came back to England and nothing was the same. And then I enrolled on a stunt team, joined that, and eventually got an equity card, trained to be an actor, and the rest is history. Yeah, so, and I got to work on Star Trek and became a so-called master instructor in Bruce Lee's art after years and years and years. So nothing's impossible.
I think you've shortened it a little bit too much, but let's go back a bit here.
Yeah.
I think the situation that I'm kind of interested in is this. I get the bit with Richard, and I want to talk about Richard in a minute, but let's just talk about your acting career, that Gene Roddenberry sort of that thing. So you went to acting school, so perhaps you could just diverse on the acting school. But what would you say your first TV or film appearance was that you actually made as stunt or as actor? Which do you feel was there?
Well, what I did, I couldn't enroll in a drama school because that's usually seen as a privileged thing, costs lots of money. So I had my martial arts and nothing else. And I went past a martial arts store one day and saw, I think it was Martial Arts Illustrated or one of those fantastic magazines. And it said on the front, do you want to be a martial arts stuntman? Oh dear. So I opened the pages and there was an advert in there for the Stunt Action Service based in Manchester. You could enroll in one of their courses, and if you passed and was taken on as one of the stunt team, you'd go around the country doing live stunt shows and train in different drama places, and with a view to getting your equity card. In those days, no one could do anything on screen without an equity card, and I didn't have one. So I thought, right, I've got to do this. So I phoned up, booked my place on the stunt team, but then fate seems to always take a hand. You know, 6 weeks before the stunt course, you had to do an obstacle course and show your ability in martial arts and screen combat and sword fencing and everything. 6 weeks before that, I was running, jumped over a fence, and as I did, my foot went down a hole the other side, the grass. I didn't know it was there. My ankle went under myself. I heard a crack, and I rolled, and my bone was poking through my sock. It dislocated so much. Yeah, so I panicked and put my foot back in, but the damage was done. So I was like, oh God, that's it. My dreams are finished. And at that time, I knew an actor called John Shackley, who was in a thing called Tripods.
Oh, yeah, no tripods.
Yeah, and John was a Nichiren Daishonin Buddhist. And he used to chant Namyo Horenge-kyo about being positive. And I was at home in plaster. I said, I've got to cancel the stunt course, John. And he said, no, this is the best thing that ever could have happened to you. I went, what are you talking about? You know? And he said, well, if you can still get on the stunt team after this, there's nothing in life you can't accomplish. It says, look on this as a positive and find another way to do it. And I was like, what? And he told me some fables, you know, and things, which I won't go into now. But 6 weeks later, ankle was still strapped. I had painkillers. But during the stunt course in Manchester, we stayed away 3 days. I had to bring a part of my personality out. That all the other people were trying to be Bruce Lee, and we had to jump off buildings and land in boxes and fire stunts and all these things. But during the live action, I made a comedy martial arts parody. I couldn't compete with these people on the martial arts scale. I could still do stuff, but with the dislocated ankle, it was not me. But I brought out something else that the others didn't have. And I found a way, and they phoned me up and said, we'd like you to join the stunt team. So again, maybe if I hadn't have had the busted ankle, I wouldn't have been on it. I began then to train in drama, and I went around the country with a stunt team, and I eventually got my equity card. And I used to do 2 things. One would be lots of extra work, walk on work to learn the craft of it until I felt confident enough to get an agent. And I used to go on and do small stunts. And because unless you're a fully fledged stuntman, you can't. But if you're a specialist, I do some fight scenes or some small falls and things. And when I eventually got my equity card and I felt confident enough, I started to get small bits of dialogue. And then I became known. Oh yeah, this guy can do some dialogue, but he can also throw himself about. So I became known as, I suppose, an action actor, really. And then I met a person you know very well, Bay Logan.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I met Bay Logan and auditioned for Bay Logan in Birmingham. And then I ended up getting a job with Bay and on a martial arts film with a young guy who became really famous in Hong Kong, Darren Shaladi.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I did the first film with Darren, and I had to fight Darren.
All right.
Yeah, bless him, he's passed away now, hasn't he?
Yeah.
And during my time, working on the bill one day, not the bill, sorry, working on EastEnders. During my breaks and anything, I was martial arts crazy, and I'd go around the back of any set I was on and train. And there was one chap I didn't even see him watching me, and I was training. And after I finished kicking and punching and doing my stuff, he came over to me and said, "Yeah, you look quite handy." And I said, "Oh, thank you." And he said, "I run a security team." He said, "Would you like to do close protection?" He said, look after dignitaries and Arabs." And wow, I hadn't really thought of that. So I'd looked after Star Trek people, but just at conventions. So as the stunt team went on, I'd learned to use firearms, stunt, guns and firing ranges. So I went and joined this security force for a while, where we did close protection for Arabs and celebrities. But I found that after about 6 months of doing that, because you were there with ex-military people, SAS people, and French Foreign Legion people, the Foreign Legion people, excuse me, were very dark all the time. And my first day there, one of them came up and stared me in the face and said, "What would you do if I put one on you?" So I looked at him and said, "Don't you mean what would I do if you tried to put one on me?" I just smiled. And he went, "Yeah, you're okay, and walked off. And I thought, Anyway, so I stayed there for 6 months, but I found that I couldn't turn off the darkness. I came home and I was on edge all the time, because all day you had to be, you had the around your neck, you had a key to the firearms locker, and these people were marked targets sometimes, like in Arabs and all this kind of stuff. So I thought, I'm becoming too dark. So I left that and continued my martial arts career, opened my own school, teaching and doing film work, and when the need arose, doing stunt work. And then Bay Logan got me into his Hong Kong stunt team with Mark Houghton. I did lots of shows with Bay and Mark. I found Mark a crazy person, but I won't go into that. Yeah, and I'm still friends with Bay to this day.
Yeah.
And then that led to me getting co-starring roles and then lead roles in action things. And I did a thing called Advanced Warriors, which was the very first interactive film game with real people. And it would stop and freeze. You could go left, go right, fight, run. And the script was this thick, because anything you chose changed the rest of the film. So it was like 10 films in one. And if you did it wrong, you get us killed or worse. And you have to go back to the beginning. And in that was Jeremy Bulloch, who played a Boba Fett in Star Wars, and Chase Masterson, who was in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. But I had the lead part, and I choreographed all the action, and it was an amazing experience. So because of that, people in the States saw it, and I got to go over and do a Western in Hollywood, as you do. playing the bad English guy. She's always a bad guy for English in a Western or anything. And my character, his name was Limey, and he'd been on the Silk Road for 10 years. He had to flee from England, an aristocrat, and he picked up some kung fu moves. So, and he used to rob the trains and stuff. And I worked with someone who'd been a hero of mine for years. I'd seen him first of all in The Silent Flute. His name was Anthony DeLongis.
Oh, yeah.
I think they pronounce it DeLongis, but
Yeah.
and he was the guy who kills himself. He's the first seeker.
Yeah,
and he
yeah,
was also in Roadhouse. He was the bad guy who had the metal spike coming out of his shoe, and he kills Patrick Swayze's instructor with his knife.
yeah.
And Anthony DeLongis played the sheriff in this film, but they asked me would I choreograph all the action. And when I got there and saw it was Anthony, wow, I said, no, surely you'll not choreograph all this, Mr. DeLongis. And he said, no, I've seen what you do. He said, your years of training shows in every movement you do. I'm happy for you to do it. So I choreographed in the States. And from that, I worked on Star Trek over there, the Western over there, and I stayed there for quite a while. That's why you thought I moved over there, didn't you?
Yeah, I thought you'd gone. I thought you were still there. But we would have interviewed you in America, don't worry. But
Yes.
you know where I'm coming. You said about comedy, and you went down comedy.
I did.
Only a few weeks ago, you turned up in British Empire.
British Empire.
So
Yeah.
tell us how you got that, and where did that fit into the story, and a little bit of it, because that's quite a mad comedy show, and
I loved it.
Very interesting for some reason.
Well, I love British Empire. For anyone who's probably too young to know it, it's about a sports centre. I used to have a lovely agent called Marcel, and she used to get me parts on all the series that were popular in those times. Also used to go and test all the games on the Generation game, which is the most embarrassing thing you could ever do. You're all day with Bruce Forsyth doing all the games and dressing up and doing all silly things. But I auditioned for a part in the British Empire as a character called Patrick. And I only ever got to have dialogue in one episode, but I was in it for 3 years. And because they knew I did the martial arts, anytime there was a fight or something crazy, I would choreograph it. We would go away to Ringwood, near Bournemouth, Ringwood, for weeks on end and film all the exterior scenes of the Whitby Newtown Leisure Centre, which it was supposed to be, with all the cast. We'd stay in a hotel and it was amazing. And then we'd come back every weekend, Saturday evening, to do in front of a live audience all the inside stuff for the BBC. So I got to do that for 3 years, and it was like a regular job, which as an actor you never get. And every cast member gets their own little theme tune as they do it in front of the live audience. You come out, introduce, and sometimes when I come out, they play the Star Trek theme. Sometimes when I come out, they should do Enter the Dragon theme. So yes, I worked on British Empire for 3 years, and we still remain friends to this day. And Chris is an amazing person. And there was a little actress called Jill Greenacre, the little blonde one called Linda. And Jill had an interest in the martial arts, and I really became close friends with Jill. And I did my own self-defense DVD called Need to Know Self-Defense, where Jill did all the female stuff and I did all the male stuff. So yeah, the connections stayed strong.
You talk about Star Trek, and of course people are very, very heavy Star Trek people these days, and it's still going on today. I think there's Strange New Worlds out there and stuff like that. So that people can, maybe, who are big Star Trek fans, is there a way that we would ever see you in or catch you, because you must like choreographed it from the back, but is there any time we if you look, we would see you on the screen in a Star Trek film or TV series?
Well, the way that came about, when I visited Gene and he said become an actor, he took me over to the costume department to a guy called Bill Tice, who designed all this costumes for original series and Next Generation. When I was over there, they were doing the Star Trek movies with the classic cast, but the Next Generation was filming then. Gene took me over to the costume department, introduced me to Bill and said, Bill, fit John for a Starfleet uniform, he's Starfleet material. So I'd never done any acting. So he gave me a walk-on part in the Next Generation, an episode about the Traveller called Where No One's Gone Before. Right. And you just see me briefly in engineering, pushing buttons and, totally Star Trek. Didn't know where I was. Amazing experience. And when I came back to England, years went by, but I'd go back each year to visit the Star Trek movie sets as Gene's guest. Years later, when they cancelled the Next Generation and J.J. Abrams came along, before that, there was a gap, and everyone wanted to recreate classic Star Trek. So a guy called James Corley rebuilt out of his own money all the classic Star Trek sets, and he recruited people who used to work on classic Star Trek behind the scenes. And Gene Roddenberry's son was a producer on it, Rod Roddenberry. And a guy called Doug Drexler. Doug Drexler has got Academy Awards, Emmys. He did all the makeup on Dick Tracy. He did all the CGI on Battlestar Galactica. And I got to meet Doug, and I had a phone call from Doug Drexler saying they're going to remake the classic series. And I think because of your bearing, they're looking for a Klingon, a lead Klingon. Would you come over and audition? Wow, you know. So I went over to the States and auditioned for a classic Klingon who just had a beard like yours, but not so white. Had a swarthy beard. So, the Ridgeheads were mainly for the movies and later on, but the original classic Klingons were just dark skinned with beards. And I auditioned for Captain Karg, the lead Klingon, who would keep coming to menace Captain Kirk. In this series, they guest starred Walter Koenig and George Takei, some of the original cast members, but my character would always come back. Unfortunately, because the rumor was that J.J. Abrams wanted his Star Trek to be the classic Star Trek, after they filmed a season of this, season and a half, they never got the license. Then another company came along, did Star Trek Renegades. They had some famous people in that. They had gorgeous Sean Young from Blade Runner. Tim Russ directed it, who played Tuvok, the Black Vulcan. He also played Tuvok. Walter Koenig played an older Chekhov. You had Nichelle Nichols, all these people in it. And they called me to be a Ridgehead Klingon and also a Starfleet Admiral. I played two parts in that. Once again, they could only release that on the internet. They played thousands. That was shot in on the sets of Firefly. If you ever saw Firefly, which
I saw Firefly, yeah.
And then another thing called Star Trek of Gods and Men was another movie that all the classic people were in, and some other, from other Star Trek, other science fiction series too. And I played a really mouthy Klingon in that who gets killed by Chekhov. So yeah, these are all on the internet. You can find all of these, but it just, the license just wouldn't be granted to all these different people.
No.
Yeah.
Well, I think so. We'll come back to that in a minute. So let's just go back. So you with Richard. How did you feel about learning Bruce Lee's art of Jeet Kune Do? What inspired you, and what made you feel that this is where you want to go? Because you've done several other martial arts, so there must have been, barring from it being Bruce Lee, there must have been something else that you think, yeah, I've done this, this, and this, but this is where I want to be. So how did it affect you?
Well, originally the draw for me was Bruce Lee. I've been badly beaten up at school, and I was beaten up even outside my front door. So I was frightened of the world. But what attracted me to Bruce Lee's art, and as I later really found the main point of it, the simplicity and directness of transmitting, for want of a better word, injury to the source of the attack straight away. To using your dominant side forward, and the simplicity of it. And as the years have gone on, and I've had hip replacements and shoulder replacements and 26 broken bones and a broken neck from all these stunt work and everything else, you can't play about whirling about and kicking in the head like I did in martial arts films and things. But the directness of the low side kick and the lead side forward, and whatever range you're in, you're lethal in that range. It's like, not really good saying about love, but if you're not with the one you love the one you're with. All right. So I found that the adaptability of Jeet Kune Do was what I felt so amazed at. If you get in front of a good boxer, just boxing, you win. But you blast his kneecaps away and he's gone. A little story about that, if I may.
Yeah.
During the years, I've had loads of challenges, and for right or wrong, I accepted challenges, and some things have been really, bad situations. And I got mugged in the street twice, and Jeet Kune Do's never let me down. But something that was quite amusing, I did a comedy show with John Conte, where he has to be in the ring and he has to fight Doc Cotton. Don't ask me why, but they had a stunt woman dressed as Doc Cotton, and and here comes Doc, and does one punch, ding, and there goes Doc. Right, so that's part of the comedy. And I played the referee in this, the corner man. was the callman.com. And someone had said to John Conte, oh, that guy in the corner is a martial arts guy. So he came over to me, oh, you do this kung fu stuff, do you? So I said, no, I do the martial arts, yeah. And so he said, oh, that's a load of shite. And I said, well, it's your opinion, John, you know. So he said, you've never met a good boxer. I said, I've met quite a few good people in various things. And all of a sudden he shaped up to me. He said, come on, started dancing around me. I said, John, you really don't want any of this. You know, I said, I respect you, don't. And he started throwing punches near me. I was just slipping, moving away. I said, go away. And all of a sudden I changed. And I shot a kick out to his knee and touched his knee. Right. And he looked down and he went to come in again. And I made out to kick him in the knee and put both his hands down. And I just shot a really fast punch out and touched his nose. I said, now go away. And he went, ah, yeah. And he swore and walked off. And I thought, wow, he was the European world champion then in boxing, you know, and it, by adapting, not trying to box a boxer without even thinking, it wasn't a real situation, but it could have easily been, you know. So it's a great leveler. Because Bruce Lee said the low psychic is the giant killer. In my past and in my life, it's been a great thing. I mean, I'm 5'7", you know, and everyone's taller than me. So, but I've never found anyone who's got tall knees, tall legs. So, yeah, it's not the be all and end all, but it's a great leveler. And Jeet Kune Do has never let me down because I've never stopped training. I've had martial arts schools now since the early 80s, and I've hopefully always said about Jun Fan Jeet Kune Do is the Christmas tree. Okay, the right side forward, fencing connection, you know, all this side kick, lead punch, and maybe Jeet Kune Do concepts is the baubles you choose to put on your Christmas tree, but you must have a Christmas tree first, you know. So the foundation of that, obviously I went on to study more Kali and lots of bladed arts because I was right about knives, and being in a stuntman, you learn to use swords and machetes. And so I love Jeet Kune Do. I don't think there's a rift, which I think's always been stupid, between, Jun Fan Jeet Kune Do, Bruce never did that, and Jeet Kune Do concepts. And for me, I don't see the separation because it's all segments of a totality, as you would say.
Yeah.
You know, as long as you put your dominant side forward whenever you can, but train your other side really hard as well, and you adapt to whatever situation you're in. You can't box a knife fighter, you know. So everything is important. So
let's talk a little bit about Richard. You said Richard was really, really sort of like took you on, and you know you got on with him. What would you say was special about Richard?
Well, when I first trained and met Sigong Bastillo, I was in awe, as we all should be. But when he came to England in 1990, first time I brought him over, Dad brought him over twice a year, all the time up to his death almost. And he would stay at my house a lot of these occasions. And the humor and humility and ordinary approach to life was lovely. I wanted to treat him like a god, you know, and he wouldn't let me. And his humor was amazing. And he always put me at my ease. I never lost respect for him because he was, you know, he was Richard Bastillo. But he had a way of approaching every human as an individual. And he could seem to give you, what Jeet Kune Do was all about, give you what you needed, not necessarily what you wanted. And he saw a little bit of arrogance in me because my father, and his mental illness, stripped me of all my confidence and everything. When I started, I used to be overweight, and you know, I never had a girlfriend until I was 21, virtual prisoner till then. I became slightly arrogant. You know, you get this newfound power, and you're in the film industry, and you can do stuff other people can't do. And I think I wasn't arrogant to lesser people, but I would always have this, you know, I'm John Carrigan about me, I think, what, you know, looking back. And I think Richard sensed that about me a little bit. And one day he said, he phoned me up and said, there's a big martial arts magazine. They want me to do an article and a video. Will you come over to the States? And do you want to be on front cover with me of this photo shoot? And we did it in the academy. And I said, oh, great. Oh, yes, if I come over, I'm going to visit the Star Trek sets, and I'll come over and, you know, so we changed it for different dates, my normal visit to Richard. And when I got over there with my then actress girlfriend, we were just set for this photo shoot, and I brought my martial arts gear with me, but I was totally mentally unprepared. I walked in there, and it was just Richard and some people from the IMB, and he said, "Oh, the photo shoot's cancelled. It's not going to happen." And I looked at him. He said, "We're going to train for 2 days." And I said, "Sifu Bastillo, was there ever a photo shoot?" And he went, "No." Yeah. And he didn't go out of his way to do it, but he put me through the ringer for 2 days. All the stick we were doing, I had to do predominantly with my left hand. I was okay with Cinderwally with both sticks and both hands, but he made everything I thought I did great. He put me on a level, and my poor girlfriend then had to sit for 2 days in the IMB Academy. I had terrible sunburn. I was over there for 4 days first, and the LA was blistering hot. But I think Richard saw what I needed. I really did need it, and he put me to spar with different people, and I did okay. Then he put me with this girl, who was, I just thought she was a girl, but she was an instructor in Penjak Salat, And so I shaped up and I did a smile as if to say, "You're a girl." And she was in on me, took my legs away. You don't have to explain what Salat is. She was literally, they're saying, "I cry on your shoulder and I'll take your life." She was crying on my shoulder the whole time. So Richard would give you what you needed, not what you wanted. And he became a really special friend. And when my 60th birthday, it was my 60th birthday, and my students had got a surprise party for me. Instead of turning up to train, they knocked on the door and said, "Sifu, get out your gear, we're taking you out." They booked a place and all the friends, even Richard Arnold, who was Gene's assistant, had flown over from the States. It was amazing. And one of my friends called Liz Eldridge, one of my students, she'd contacted Sifu Bastillo and said, it's John's 60th birthday. Could you send him some kind of message he can read out? Well, no one knew at that time that Richard died 2 weeks before my birthday. So no one knew he was ill. Didn't anyone know? I didn't know. Maybe you knew. I didn't know.
No, I didn't know. No.
And Liz, Richard sent this wonderful email in italic writing with date of my birthday, the 4th of April on it, wishing happy birthday and sending me this message about what's important in life and what a great instructor he thought I was. I can touch the future, keep instructing, but don't worry about hip replacements, shoulder replacements. He said, because illness, a worry makes you busy doing nothing. He's obviously had the weight of his shoulders. He knew he was going to pass away. But what he said in that wonderful email to me, which was framed, I read it out on my 60th. I cried my eyes out because he was talking to me from beyond the grave. But to be that giving right at the very end, to send me that wonderful last message, that was the man he was. He was the Iron Man of Jeet Kune Do, but also the compassion and the humor he had was incredible. And he gave me so much more than just martial arts movements. Now, I got to train, luckily, with Taki Kimura, another incredible man, Ted Wong, Larry Hartzell. I spent my money traveling and doing that. But Richard was my main Sifu, and I bow to him every time in my gym, as we should do. And I just give a little nod as well, because, he would want that. And the humanity of these people, when I went to Bruce Lee's grave in Seattle,
No, that's fine. Fine, keep going.
Grave in Seattle. I think it was my 50th birthday, I think. I'm 67 now, a couple of weeks ago. Taki Kimura arranged to meet me. And you've obviously been to Seattle, and I was looking for Bruce Lee's grave, and I froze, and I saw, wow, it's Bruce Lee's grave. And I was with my wife. I stood there, all of a sudden I looked up, and there came, Sigong Taki with Andy Kimura.
Yeah.
And I stood there and I bowed, and he reached his arms out and said, "Hey, don't bow to me. I'm just the old fart on the block."
That's him.
And he hugged me, and I was, wow. And we stayed at Bruce's grave before it had the railings. There's no railings then. And he said, "Would you like to take a picture?" I said, "Well, is that okay?" He said, "Yeah." And we stood behind Bruce's grave and Brandon's grave. And he said, John, why aren't you smiling? He said, Bruce would want you to smile. I said, I can't. So he gave my shoulder a squeeze and we just stood there and had a picture by Bruce Lee's grave. So these great men, great lethal men, had hearts of, they could feel what you felt.
Yeah.
So I think that's the legacy I take with me. I try and pass on to my students. I do, I try and mentor my people. I do life coaching. I represent Mind for my dad and his schizophrenia. You've got to read my book. All the money from that goes to mental health.
It's just all day, because that was one of my next questions. Is you said you've written a book? Can you tell us a bit more about the book and what inspired you to write it?
Yeah, the book is called The Other Side of Harry. My dad's name was Harry. One side of him was a lovely pianist, lovely man, and the other side was a demon. When he went, he went. You'd be watching TV, and all of a sudden he'd hear a secret sound that wasn't really there. He would jump up and put his foot through the television. As a baby, I was dangled over the balcony. My mum's head was smashed in with a poker, so we had a very, very hard life. But the first page when you open my book says, the thing that makes a star shine bright is the darkness that surrounds it. I would never have got to become master instructor in Jeet Kune Do. I would never have worked in Hollywood. I would never have met Gene Roddenberry or hopefully affected people's lives if I hadn't have had such a dark past. I had to shine somehow. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I was a guest at a convention because I worked on various programs in Star Trek. You're asked to be guest at conventions. It sounds very narcissistic, but you take photos of you, if you're an actor, and you sign them, and people pay you, for the pictures, as I used to do at the conventions when I got, So I learned that, okay, I don't feel guilty doing this, I will do it. I never charged as much as other people. And at one convention, I'm standing there, and this really large guy came up to me. He was, his hair was plastered to his head with sweat, profusely sweating. And he looked at me and I said, who would you like the picture signed out to? And he started to shake and he burst out crying. And he said, it's all right for you, you're a martial arts expert and you've been in Star Trek, but I've had it hard. You think I'm fat? I've had it hard. And he burst out crying and he started to walk away. I jumped up from behind the desk, went round and I hugged him and said, look, whatever you're going through, you'll get through this. And after it affected me so much. I thought, these people are living lives of silent desperation, as you say. They see me as this so-called mini celebrity. They don't know the hell I came from. Mm. How can I inspire people, to not give up? So I wrote the book from 1926, when my mum and dad were born, right up until when they passed away, and this book now was 17 years old or something like that. But I got feedback, and all the money from the book goes to a mental health charity, which is called Chipmunker. They're mental health publishers. I got feedback from all around the world about this book, that the key message in it is that nothing's impossible, but if you give up today, tomorrow you might have made it. Whether it's an illness or whatever you're going through, we can't give up. And it inspired people to do that. And that's what I wanted to do. And I'm working now been working the past 2 years with a brilliant producer, writer and director called Dean Drinkle. And Dean, we're trying to get this into an 8-part series because I've had a strange life, Bodyguard, Star Trek, Stuntman, all this stuff, from the Elephant Castle. But it may now be, hopefully we're going to try and find a way to do a documentary, because if I could inspire people to survive, the lovely letters I got from people, if I could do it on a visual thing, a documentary about this story, I just want people to, I used to punch the walls. I'll never have a job, never have a girlfriend. Dad will dominate us forever. I lived in fear. And I built myself a Captain Kirk chair. We had 2 rooms upstairs. We sleep on mattresses on the floor and on the sofa. There was an old disused room downstairs where we lived. And I built myself a Captain Kirk chair out of cardboard and stuff. And when my dad, when he was upstairs raging, I used to put my Star Trek room. I had pictures on the walls. When he was upstairs raging, I could hear him. I remember as a young boy, I'd sit in this chair, imagining I was Captain Kirk, give me courage. And, because the fear was terrible. And when I actually got on the sets and sat in Captain Kirk chair, that little boy came back and I thought, this is impossible. And I pushed the button on the chair and went, nothing's impossible. So I wrote the book to inspire and to just let people know, don't give up, because the alternative is what? You know, it's impossible. No, it's not.
Now, John, I want to talk to you about something that might be difficult. You've made, and you're a lead in a pilot TV show.
Humber City.
Humber City looks amazing. What happened with it, and why hasn't it been made?
Yes, okay. I was approached by a guy called Peter Gundrill. He was a writer and a producer years ago. I think it's nearly 10 years ago now, 7, 8 years. Well, he lived in Hull. And he had this great idea for Humber City. And I was going to play this lead detective called McGavin, who was had a dark side to him. So we shot a pilot episode. I thought we did it was really gritty, you know, swearing, violence, but for reasons, you know, we did that. Then Peter Gundrill says, oh, it's pretty good, but I want to change it. I want to make it a bit more futuristic, because there's lots of cop shows about. Anyway, long story short, Andrew, got some great actors on it, there's some great stunts, some great fight scenes, some great characters. I really enjoyed doing it. Big responsibility to have the lead in the series. We spent a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort. And sorry to say this, Pete, but Pete Gundrill just kept trying to overcook the pot. Nothing was ever enough. And we've hours and hours and hours of footage that will go nowhere because Pete's vision kept changing. And in the end, how many times can you keep going? I went up to Hull 4 times, did all these things, and down here and promoted it. And so, yeah, I had great hopes for Humber City. It looked great. And the footage I've got, if I could release it, I would love to, you know, but there you go.
So is it sort of like dead in the water, or do we know what's?
Yeah, unless Pete Gundrill, I think, can get some backers to solidify what he's got, put it all into one cohesive thing. There's hours and hours and hours of footage. Even if he jumped timelines to make this work, you know, but he owns it.
Yeah.
We worked our socks off for it, and I was very proud of it because it made the character I played was a very flawed man. You know, the anger was in him all the time, and he was very dark. And I thought it was some of the best acting I'd done, you know, because it was so real. You couldn't go over the top on anything. It was just reality. And filming in Hull, it's a experience. So, but yeah, I'd love him to release, but I don't think we'll ever see it.
No, what a shame. What a shame. So let's get to a little bit to the wind-up time. So you have your own school. Tell us a little bit about that, and where's John going now?
John's going boldly wherever he goes. Boldly goes. Yeah, I've had a school I had one in Wimbledon for years when I lived in Wimbledon, and it was always Jeet Kune Do. It was always Jeet Kune Do. But until I qualified as a Jeet Kune Do instructor, I would still teach Bruce's art, but I called it Sulong Tao. And I joined forces with an amazing friend of mine who's now passed away, called Martin Sterling from Nottingham. Martin was a great martial artist, really great with weapons. We joined forces and created Sulong Tao. So now I call my art Sulong Tao Jeet Kune Do, because I'm allowed to teach Jeet Kune Do, but I still put the Sulong Tao on it. I used to teach at a sports centre down here for 17 years. And then the management of that changed, and they threw all the old instructors out. So I had a gym built beside my house where I continued to teach. And I retired as a full-time martial arts instructor last April.
Oh,
so now I teach private students because I don't just want to cut people loose and say, it was never a job to me. It was always my passion. And you can't just cut people loose when they're that far on a journey, you know? So I still teach, and I train myself. I do 6 hours a week my own training, and I do another 6 hours a week teaching. So even though I'm an old bugger at 67 and bits falling off, it's because Bruce Richard, and all my instructors would still want me to, you know. And as long as you can touch someone and affect them, as you know, Andrew, martial arts is self-protection first and foremost, but it also changes you from the inside. You know, the confidence it gives you is everything, and that goes into every aspect of your life. You know, even if you get a health scare, you have the strength inside you. I'll get through this, you know. So I'm still teaching, and where I'm off to next, I don't do stunt work anymore. I still choreograph. I'm a registered choreographer. I'll still choreograph fight scenes. I did my last ever spar, full contact spar, not this November, last November. And with one of my students I trained for 9 years. They have to survive me for half an hour, then another instructor for half an hour. And he's 6'3", and you've trained him for all these years. And during that fight, because it's full contact, his job is to take me out if he can, and I've got to not destroy him if I can. But with 6'3", being this old, yeah, it ended fine, but I got caught in the eye by a punch, and during it, you don't realize you have, and I had a retina tear, and then the blood vessel to the major artery ruptured, and I nearly lost my left eye last year. And I had to have 4 lots of laser treatment. They couldn't repair it, so I've got lots of floaters in this eye at the moment. It always will be, and it's lost about 15% vision of it. So I thought maybe it's time to stop sparring now.
Yeah.
So I still train all the time. If anyone did anything stupid to me in the street, they'd be gone in a second, because I still, you know, practice the tip of the spear. I think the martial arts in general is a searchlight, self-perfection and all these spin kicks and everything, but self-defense is a laser beam, as you know. Bruce Lee was all about the laser beam.
Yeah, absolutely.
I still maintain the laser beam. So it still has a big effect on my life, the martial arts, and because I represent mind and collect for them, and I give positive speaking engagements for people. My job there is to give people the strength to survive these times, you know, whether it's physically, emotionally, or spiritually. It all sounds very holier than thou, but
no, it sounds great.
That's what gives me the buzz, because when I worked in Hollywood and did all that wonderful stuff, and unless you give back, then I don't feel guilty for the wonderful stuff I've done, because I know I've tried to balance it with other stuff, and, you know, give to the people who were like me when I was young. Yeah. So yeah, I'm off to look after William Shatner again in July. I'm going to get beaten up by a 93-year-old Captain Kirk, which is my honor. There's a picture here of, if I can show it.
Yeah, do it.
It's Bill from November punching me in the face, beating me up as Captain Kirk. Can you see that?
Yeah, fantastic, John. Absolutely fantastic.
It's amazing. If we can all be like that at 93, then let's 93.
Of course, Bill has his own story, which I'm sure you can help with him, because he trained in martial arts.
Yeah, he's always been. Tom Bleecker was his instructor.
Yeah,
who married Linda Lee, and he's always been physical. He loves the martial arts.
Yeah, so that would be amazing. So at this point, we'll say thank you very much. At this point, we're going to come back to you at another time. On that one, we know the last thing we've got to say, just for the Klingon, is John Chu.
Johnny Chu. Beam me up. Bye, guys. Thanks a lot.
See you,
Thank you very much.